In my trailer, I use conventional methods of getting the narrative across to my audience. My trailer begins with a sense of equilibrium that is disrupted by an attack on one of the characters. This is typical of Todorov's equilibrium and is something that is conventional of one of the trailers that I analysed in the pre-production stage. Through particular shot types and mise-en-scène, enigmas were created. For example, by mimicking the actions of the characters through this point-of-view shot taken from underneath this car, this suggests that the character is hiding from something. The audience begins to question why they're hiding and how they got there. This is a feature of a conventional trailer that I use to portray a mystery to draw the audience into the narrative of the trailer. Conventionally, teaser trailers develop enigma and disequilibrium and leave resolution, and I followed this convention. I used and developed horror iconography through the use of mise-en-scène. Throughout my trailer, I made sure that the child was consistently seen with the ripped and bloody teddy bear, to symbolise the post-apocalyptic theme that I was attempting to portray. I was inspired by District 9's theatrical trailer and how the institution decided to use the motif of signs to emphasise a particular area within the narrative. I used asynchronous sound within my trailer to create a narrative effect that creates enigma. This suggests what's happening within the narrative without visually showing the viewer, which is effective within teaser trailers. The poster remains fairly conventional in terms of the narrative. For example, I applied Bart's theory of enigma codes to my product. This character appears covered in blood, with ruined makeup and a dismantled teddy bear. This creates an enigma as how this character came to the state is secluded from the audience. Also, by having the character appear in this way connotes signs of a violent battle, which represents the narrative of the film. Throughout the posters that I analysed for my textual analysis, I saw that a significant amount of the narrative is conveyed through the location in the background of the image. This is something that I wanted to portray within my image. Although it's fairly dark, the background of the image appears eroded and run down. I wanted the backdrop of the image to be surrounded by negative connotations, because I thought this would convey the narrative of my film more effectively. The research I did on shapes can be used to connote specific meanings that can be applied to my product here. For this product, I conformed to these conventional features as I thought it would effectively convey the narrative of my product. Through using conventional methods, the audience is able to establish the genre of my media product. For example, iconography is used throughout the trailer to symbolise features of a particular genre. By analysing the trailers of District 9 and the Blair Witch Project, I noticed that handheld camera movements and a record symbol at the top right of the frame connotes the documentary genre. So I applied this to several shots on my trailer. I used conventions of existing media products by replicating certain shot types and mise-en-scène to convey the horror genre. I replicated this shot from the Blair Witch Project's trailer by shooting the scene in a pitch-black forest, solely lighted by the use of an on-camera light source. By basing certain parts of my trailer on existing media products, I conformed to particular conventions of conveying a genre. I based many of the zombie sound effects on those of the Resident Evil Extinction trailer. This shows how I conform to conventions of real media products by using sound effects to portray the science fiction genre. Although, I challenged conventions by creating a hybrid mockumentary genre. I did this by basing the narrative and many of my shot types on those that I saw in the 3 trailers that I analysed during pre-production. For example, I used video diary shot types to display a sense of realism within my narrative, connoting the documentary genre in conjunction with shots including science fiction creatures, displaying the science fiction genre, as well as displaying stereotypically generic horror scenes. I created the trailer in this way because I thought I could bring elements of all 3 products into my media product effectively. Within my poster, I used conventional methods of portraying the genre of my film. For example, by having the subject smeared in blood stereotypically represents the horror genre. I chose this particular costume because it remains a conventional feature of this particular genre. I edited the background of the primary image of the poster to make it look like the picture was taken in the dark. The image on my web page portrays a melancholy and morbid atmosphere. These are all conventions of conveying the horror genre. Through iconography, the audience identifies with the genre of the film. By featuring the Paramount Vantage logo within my trailer and on my web page and poster, my target audience would associate my product with existing films that Paramount Vantage produces of a similar genre. Here I use conventions by using iconography to address my audience and represent my genre. For this product, I developed on conventions of real media products, by linking different genres together within the same product. I did this across all 3 products by using a Shaun of the Dead style font. By using intertextuality here to draw links to highly recognised films of the science fiction genre, my product would immediately be associated with this genre, and as a result of this, my product targets fans of the science fiction genre. Although, by combining links to 3 different genres, forms and conventions were developed on. I conformed to conventions by representing the younger member of the groups reporting to the older man. Using a shot-reverse shot here emphasizes the authority of the leader because the focus is on him, as the other character's facial features are somewhat hidden by the composition of the characters within the frame. By arming this character with a weapon, while the other character appears unarmed, enhances the representation of authority and masculinity within this character. Although this is a stereotypical ideology of a male leader, this challenges the forms of the media product they're based the scene on. In the Resident Evil trailer, the gender roles were reversed. The seemingly alpha male was seen reporting to the female character. Although I thought this wasn't going to be effective in terms of narrative within my product, so I decided to contradict this representation and swap the gender roles. In my product, I conformed to a stereotypical representation of female characters. In this shot, I portrayed the female in the attack as a victim. She appears unarmed and emotional, which suggests that she is passive and somewhat weak. This also conforms to stereotypes of the female characters. This is a conventional feature of existing media products, as I saw that the institution portrays the female character in the Blair Witch Project in a similar way. Within my product, I represented many of the locations as familiar environment, to enhance the sense of realism within my narrative. This is conventional, as the media products that I analysed in pre-production represent their locations in a similar way. I challenged forms and conventions by contradicting the stereotypical representation of young female characters. Throughout the trailer, the child appears passive and weak. In this shot, she's sleeping in the backseat of a car under a blanket clutching a teddy bear, which is a stereotypical representation of children. And in this shot, she appears passive and emotional, although in the final shot, she is seen armed with the same weapon that was seen on the alpha male character earlier in the trailer. Here she is portrayed as powerful, able to defend herself, and not as a victim. As children are rarely represented in this way, this is how I challenge forms and conventions of the representation of characters in real media products. Within the image of my poster, I used various conventions in terms of representation. The subject is looking away from the camera. By having no eyeline match to the audience, this character is represented as passive and somewhat powerless. This character conforms to the stereotypical representation of children. Through facial expressions, the audience recognizes a sense of personal distress, which represents the narrative of my film. Through methods of photo manipulation, the setting appears dark. This plays on the idea that children are scared of the dark. Also, she appears alone within the composition. This is a stereotypical representation of a vulnerable, powerless child. While analysing District 9 and Resident Evil Extinction's posters, I noticed how the institution's use of symbolism through the use of props signifies the representation of their characters, as well as the location that they appear in. By drawing inspiration from this ideology, I simulated this by including the teddy bear within the shot. This emphasizes the childlike representation of the character by boosting connotations of innocence and vulnerability. By drawing in these obvious stereotypes, this shows how I conform to conventional methods of representing my main character. By doing this, I made my product appeal to a wider audience. When comparing and contrasting my product to real media products such as Resident Evil Extinction's theatrical poster, I challenged conventions in terms of the representation of my main character. The character on Resident Evil's poster is sexualized and appears as dangerous and powerful, whereas the character on my product is represented as vulnerable and passive. I challenged this convention as I thought it would be more effective in terms of representing the narrative and genre of my film. In terms of making my product appeal to a particular demographic, I conformed to conventions of real media products in various ways. I made sure that I included scenes that would appeal to fans of the horror genre. I did this by making the lighting and narrative of the shot stereotypical of the horror genre. I also targeted a primarily male audience by including action scenes with somewhat sexualized female characters. This is similar to how the audience makes the main character look throughout the Resident Evil promotional campaign. I challenged conventions by including scenes that could possibly appeal to a primarily female audience. In these shots, I attempted to bring out a more emotional and dramatic side to the narrative in these documentary-style scenes. I challenged conventions here by not only basing the trailer on an action-packed narrative, but also including the emotional side to the storyline. In my trailer, I conformed to conventions in terms of the institutional elements of the product. Through secondary research and textual analysis, I noticed that the length of conventional teaser trailers are about 1 minute long. I also noticed that trailers feature a film's rating certification and the product's institutional logo at the beginning of the trailer before the footage begins to play. Throughout the footage in the District 9 teaser trailer, I noticed that the institution placed captions in between the scenes to give away more of the narrative. I drew inspiration from this and used this feature within my trailer. For the end sequence on my product, I imitated the one from District 9. I also used conventions by using the Steel Tongues font within my billing block. I didn't necessarily want to challenge or develop conventions at all in terms of the institutional elements of my product. This is because I wanted these elements to remain traditional and conventional. On my webpage, I conform to conventions in terms of the layout of the product. I based the composition of this product on the District 9 webpage to ensure easy navigation for the users. I featured links to what would be the film's social networking websites, as institutions would use these websites as a platform to promote their product and attract their target audience.